Hello coaches, welcome back to another Modern Soccer Coach podcast interview. This week we are joined by Peter Prickett. No better time to talk to Peter. We're just come off the announcement from the English FA on the 3v3 rule being implemented at younger ages. For years Peter has been writing, publishing, promoting, supporting 3v3 methodology with youth players. Highly recommend you check out his work. I'll put a link below to a couple of webinars he's done as well. He's unbelievable in this area. I'm really happy to talk about this topic with him. As usual, please like and please make sure you subscribe. And if you want to check out our new webinar, 4231 webinar coming this week on Friday, please check out. I'll put the link below as well. 4231 modernsoccercoach.com. Thanks for all the support. Here we go. Peter, 3v3 announcement. Peter, thanks so much for joining me on a emergency version of Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Really excited to chat, and congrats on the recent news.
Thanks. I don't know if I could take all the congratulations. I think there are many people who've been on this bandwagon for quite a long time. Okay, 3v3 is it's there. The FA have outlined it. It's coming. It's not coming till 2026. We've still got a season and a half, really, until it's going to be something that comes in. And it's only coming in at under 7 at the moment. Personally, I'd run it at under 8 as well, but that's me. And the fact that it's in there now, I'm taking that as the win. It's there. It needs to be expanded and grown upon as things move forward into the future.
Yeah, that's what we're going to discuss today is kind of the progressions. What do we need to take this as a community? One of the things I wanted to just be kind of clear up, as we're with the US based audience as well, who are going to take a great interest in this, and obviously people from around the world. In a quick summary of what was there before, what have they changed? And you mentioned 2026 for it all kicking in.
The age, the formats used at different age groups have been shifted. Essentially, what they've done, they slotted 3v3 in at the beginning, and that then shifts everything else up one. So under 13s would stay at 9v9 for an extra year before going to 11v11, essentially because everything has moved up by one age. So 5v5 at under 8, which it already was, but under 7 was 5v5 as well. Now it's 3v3, 5v5, and at under 9, they will play 5v5 and so on. So that's the key change. And for the majority of people who are coaching, it's really going to be those changes that affect them, especially at grassroots level. I had a chat with somebody recently, and actually, unsurprisingly, with all these things, there's change, so people object. People aren't happy with change. But a lot of the people who are not happy with it aren't going to be coaching under 7 when it comes in. A lot of the people who are going to be coaching grassroots under 7s when it becomes 3v3 format don't even know right now that they're going to be coaching at all, because their kid is 5 years old and maybe doesn't even like the look of a ball, maybe never even kicked a ball, hasn't been influenced by his or her friends that, oh, actually, this is something that's fun and I want to go and do. So really, a lot of the people who have voiced objections, especially on a practical level, aren't going to be the people who have to deal with those issues.
That was one of my questions that I want to ask is, who on earth would push back on this? Is the threat, I guess I'll rephrase that, is the threat people pushing back, or is the threat that this momentum gets lost?
I'm not sure if there's a real threat, because from what I can tell, the FA are determined for it to come. So a threat to it happening, I don't think there is one. A threat to it being successful, and they've been very conservative having it just under 7. So even if it's not particularly successful in a single age group, it doesn't really impact the overall changes. So like I said, for the majority, it's the overall format changes of everything being shunted back a year that will have a bigger impact. And a lot of the objections from what I have read, to me, are all things that are fairly easy to fix, and a lot of things that require only a little bit of education, such as the main one that comes out, or the biggest one, is we need more adults. We're going to need more adults because a group of 5v5 that would have needed one adult is now going to be two groups of 3v3. We need two adults, which is not the case. It's not going to be the case. In terms of managing a match day, you do not need an adult for each of your 3v3 groups that are playing. You need one to have a look and make sure things are running okay. And that is also the role of the opposition coach. So you essentially will have two adults there anyway. The only problem with that they need to look at is a particular piece of wording in terms of safeguarding. So the safeguarding wording requires one adult per team. Now, if you look at each set of 3v3s as a team, yeah, you do need two adults. But if you look at them as an overall squad, overall group, anything that phrases it in that manner, because realistically, one adult can definitely look after 6 children. I mean, it's not even half. It is half of what you have playing 11v11. So yes, they can. It's going to require a little bit of adjustment in the wording from the FA to change safeguarding. If they don't change it, then technically, yes, you do need more adults. But on a practical level, you don't.
Why do you think, of course, not to underplay your role and the momentum that's been created in the community to push for this, but why do you think the FA chose now to make this decision?
That's a hell of a question. I don't really know why now. I know that there are some factors that delayed it, in that they felt that they had to carry out sufficient research. They had to test it. They had to write down a set of rules and laws for the actual games and formats themselves. Although if I was to guess, that as we sit here right now on the end of Feb in 2025, I suspect that those final laws and rules of the 3v3 game or games that we see on match day are not yet finalized. I'm going to guess that they're still writing those now, because I believe that right now they're still running test events. So I'd be very surprised if there's anything or nothing that comes up during the test events that they need to change. I'm pretty sure there will be.
Yeah, I just wondered if there was, of course in the US we're distanced from it, but I was wondering if it's one of those DNA moments almost, or if there's someone underneath who's, I haven't heard much about the FA in any space in the last 6 months, so I'm wondering if there's a change there at all.
Well, it's been christened Future Fit on documents. I don't know if that's an official thing that's coming through. Don't know, but that's what it says on the top of the documents, Future Fit. Whether that's a rebranding that's coming, I genuinely don't know. The DNA has been around a long time now. DNA has been around a decade, I think. Yeah, it was around when I did my UFB futsal course, which was 10 years ago. So it's been around at least a decade, which is longer than I think the future game lasted. So they probably are due a change in that respect. Maybe it is that Future Fit becomes something that replaces the DNA, or maybe Future Fit is part of something else with another name. Who knows what that might be?
You've been banging this drum a long time. I'm obviously now in the youth space way more. So, and we've had you on. I'm going to put the link to the recent webinar you done for us at Surf. I'll put the link there. The coaches can see it as well. It was absolutely brilliant. But something that I actually experienced, I have a 6-year-old who had his first experience in football 6 months ago. They played 6v6. Now, he is not a good player, so I'm not blaming the format for his lack of progression. But wow, does it give kids who are learning the game an out for engagement, minimal touches per game, minimal decisions. It gave him so many different exits, and he had no interest in it. And I was really taken back on that, of like, wow, this format has just absolutely not destroyed my kid's progression, but the experience. Talk a little bit about that. Like, it doesn't seem, I think when you're in 11v11 world that I was, it doesn't seem like a big change to go from 4v4 to 3v3. Talk about how big that change is.
It's one of those things that I think you can only really feel or understand the change when you see it in action. It reminds me of when I was delivering and tutoring for futsal. And one of the things that we did on the level 1 was we absolutely made certain that they took part in a game so they could feel how much faster it was. So only once you see the kids playing 3v3 do you see that they can't just disappear into a corner, because the ball will find them. They don't have to work particularly hard either. And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, that's another story, but they'll be involved. They will be in close enough proximity to the ball, to the goal, to the opponent to be involved. And like you say, I've been banging the drum for a long time because I've been using the format. And the story of my journey into 3v3 was because we were working on a unit at the development center, which was 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s. I think the 3v and even 4v4s actually. And 1v1's great. 2v2s, I was not happy because I didn't think there were enough relevant game interactions to justify doing it for more than 10 or 15 minutes as a progression from 1v1, or maybe a 30-minute chunk on its own. I actually felt in some ways you got more returns from 2v1 than you did from 2v2. So I then went and looked at the 3v3s. So, okay, straight away, we get more returns because so many of the core moves and combinations in football involve 3 players. So straight away, you've got more of those. You've got more for defenders because you can suddenly create actual meaningful depth rather than having 2 players in a direct line, which you'd never want. So we don't want that. So that means the only real thing that the 2 players can do, they can stand directly shoulder to shoulder, side by side, with a meter or 2 apart. We don't really want that either. So all you've got is basically that old job and a half. One goes up, one goes back, one goes up, one goes back, or man-to-man marking. That's it. Well, you can have that and more in 3v3 because you can just shape your triangle with 1 player up and 2 players deep, or 2 players up, 1. You can have a line. You can have a staggered line. So even defensively, it changes the equation. So there's the returns that started to come out. But then you actually played it, and I did it. Fortunately, I was able to do it at a grassroots club of very mixed ability and at a development center of relatively high ability. And they were both doing 3v3. And actually, at the end of the season, we managed to get it that the 2 groups played each other, which was really interesting to see. They displayed a number of the same traits, like players were willing to take people on 1v1. There were some quick combinations, but ultimately the slightly higher ability players won out. But then I look now, and there's 2 players from that grassroots team who are at the development center all these years later. So they would have been, well, one of them, I can tell you, he was 5 when he did that, and he is 13 now. But he's gone all the way through. his first experience was doing that 3v3. And at grassroots, when we did the 3v3 practices, the lesser quality players were able to take part, even when they were grouped or part of a group of the upper end of the quality range, let's put it that way. They were still a part of it. But because the kids would ask, can we play a big game now? So at the end, we would go to a 6v6 for the last 15, 20 minutes. Those kids vanished again. They'd gone. They were just sort of walking around. Yeah, I'm on this pitch, not seeing the ball. And then all sense of shape and structure that you may get as a benefit from playing a larger number game has gone, because you just got a couple of people just wandering around. So they're not a part of that team shape and structure anymore. So those benefits disappear, and you get a very fractured version of a game with people not being involved at all, which is not what you get in even your basic 3v3 environment.
All right, coaches, we'll take a quick break here. As always, massively appreciate all the support of Modern Soccer Coach. Every like, every share goes a long way to increasing the exposure for the channel, increasing the support, and increasing the community and increasing the reach of Modern Soccer Coach. We just passed 50,000 subscribers. Our goal is 100,000. The promise we've made to all the subscribers is, as the channel keeps growing, we will put out more and more content, high quality content, to support youth, professional, high school, college, every aspect of the game. We do have an upcoming webinar on Friday, March 7th, 4231, Attacking and Defensive Principles. Please join us for that. I will put the link below. 4231 webinar. If you missed the live version, as always, there is a replay available that's sent to all the people who register. The last one we did was a phenomenal response. Playing with a back three webinar, we had Bernat Mosquera on that. The replay is also available at modernsoccercoach.com/shop. Again, thank you for all the support. Really appreciate it. Back to Peter. Yeah, that's where I was. I actually went on your LinkedIn before this and was like, there can't be anyone who's arguing, and it needs to happen over here as well. But I think my personal opinion is that the resistance comes from the organization. The resistance comes that it's easier to have a game for 6v6 with less setup, but that's wrong.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are a few technical, tactical people pushing back, very few, but there's a few who are saying, are we not just going to get more individualism if we go to 3v3 rather than 5v5?
Who said that?
That's what someone has said. Now, the thing with that is, well, maybe it would,
Yeah.
but that's not a bad thing. But they're 7, so they're individuals anyway. The individualism is fundamentally within them. They don't have that empathy to consider playing to each other until another 2 or 3, sometimes even more years down the road, which is not a coaching thing, really. That's just a part of the way that young people develop. And then we just talked about tactical structure. You won't get the tactical structure that players need later on if they're playing 3v3. But, well, for me, the problem there is people confusing tactical knowledge and understanding with an understanding of principles of how to play the game, because no matter how big the format is, the principles are going to be the same. You just might get a few more options with a longer or wider pitch, such as switching play and playing in behind, and maybe crossing. But if there's a heading ban, then so what? But they can learn those later. They can learn the fundamentals within that smaller run. So those two have been flagged as tactical and technical objections. But as you just said, by and large, it's organization. People saying, where are we going to get the extra pitches from? Which, to my response is, well, if you've got a 5-a-side pitch, you've already got a space big enough for 2 3v3 games. And like, I remember taking a group. I wasn't the coach, I was the head coach at this club, and their coach wasn't available for this. They were under 7. So I took them for their first game, and I'm watching them. I'm looking at this 5-a-side pitch, and I hadn't really coached under 7 on a game day before. And I looked, and I'm just looking at the size of the pitch and the size of the kids, and I'm thinking, God, they could almost play a match just in the penalty area, especially a 3v3 game, just in the penalty area of that pitch. Never mind half the pitch. They could easily have played a 5-a-side game in half the 5-a-side pitch, and they wouldn't have struggled to get around, but the area would have been okay. They couldn't get around the 5-a-side pitch. They just couldn't. They could hardly get out of their half. So, and then you've got the whole issue of goal kicks, and the goalkeeper can't kick the ball far enough. And yeah, we've got the retreat line, so the players are going back to the halfway line. The goalkeeper's kicking it. It's just about getting somewhere towards halfway, and whoosh, the players are on them. So it made with some players at some levels, even the retreat line makes very little difference. Yeah. It just means that players some clubs, I know they do this, are standing there like they're sprinters at a start line, about to wait for the gun to go, and whoosh, in they go. I'm not quite sure what that's teaching them, because it's not teaching them pressing, because that ain't how you press. Teaching them swarming. Okay. There's maybe, if you look at Klopp era Liverpool, there's an element of the swarm on in it, but it's not really transferable by and large. So the retreat line is another thing that you shouldn't need if you're doing 3 versus 3.
Yeah, that's what my kids was, because there was 6 of them. It was like rugby, where they would progress the ball as a group together, protecting it around. And then again, it sounds as if I'm blaming it for lack of my kids' progression, but the other thing I noticed was in the bigger spaces, we talk about the age, the size. The fastest kid is not only at an advantage, the fastest kid runs the game if it's a big space. So, but that, like, the solution to that for me is all the things you're saying about tactics. Is like, yeah, the coach who wants to be Pep Guardiola quicker doesn't get to be Pep Guardiola. He has to now work in a different context of actually development rather than systems of play. But there actually are principles and systems within that. So, like, for me, you need more education around that. Yeah. Which again, your 3-3-3 methodology has outlined this. So, big thing I want to ask you was, surely now, to get this to land, we also need the methodology supporting it. How do we do that?
This is currently unknown in England. I think mid-March we are due some webinars and the nationwide events. I think some roadshow events at the county FAs, where they're going to explain more. When I say explain more, I can't tell you if what they're going to explain is the playing format, or if they're going to explain what the support mechanism is. They just said they're going to tell us more. But really, if I was being a shameless, selfish person, I would say that the only real way for them to get the education is to read my books. But that's not a million miles off, because in terms of what's out there, where else are they going to really get it from? There's no other books out there right as yet. I'm sure there's people typing away as we speak, getting their stuff out, and that's fine. And there are some resources on YouTube, and there are practices, but I don't know how many of them go into the level of explaining why this is a good thing, what the benefits are, and how this impacts training. That's another important thing. And obviously, I've had many conversations, unsurprisingly, since the announcement. That one of the things was actually what's not been hugely discussed is how it changes what people are going to do in training. Because if you are doing 3v3 on your match day, where can you even justify any logic behind doing 5v5 in your training session? The only justification that you might allow is the kids want to do it. Great. If you've got even an hour's training and they want to do this a 6v6, 5v5 all in at the end, cool, go for it. But the rest of your session is probably going to look quite different. So a games-based 3v3 practice or practices will immediately have some kind of recognizable shape that matches up with what you do on game day. So we should get coaches and parents who are saying, oh, we need to do what we do on game day during training. Okay, great. Go and play 3v3 in training. Fantastic. That's fantastic. Because of all of the varied returns of additional touches and game actions and everything that we've touched upon.
Yeah. There's an opportunity for education because of the gap. I just don't think that people know how to run a 3v3 training session, and people think it limits the tactical concepts, but in reality, which you do, how many different games do you have? Like 500 different ways to spin it?
I mean, God, I don't even know now how many different games there are. I mean, especially when I explain to people that 3v3 methodology for me is not just playing 3v3 only. It's playing 3v3 with additional players, bounce players, magic players, 3v3 plus 2 goalkeepers, and so on. As long as the core number of players, of outfield players taking part, is 3 per team, it's still for me part of the 3v3 methodology. So when you add that in, your amount of possibilities just goes up exponentially. And the things that you can change, like I use the words affordances and attractors because of the academic background, but if you understand that the things that you can change are the goals, the playing size, the zones of the area, and you start playing with all of those things, you get many more possibilities that will create different outcomes. So yeah, there's so many possibilities that you can do. And as an example, so that people can understand how I would potentially do it, I've taken a lot of the younger groups now. So I've gone from that situation where I've never taken a group on game day, but I've taken a lot of younger groups at training. Training sessions, they are often given to me deliberately, or I take them deliberately, especially beginners. And I will set up 3 or whatever the required number of pitches are side by side, and each one will be slightly different. And all I need to do is move along after 10 minutes or so. So pitch number 1 could just be 2 pop-up goals at each end. Off you go and play. Pitch number 2 could be 2 larger goals, so 1 at each end, like a 5-a-side size goal, and we could have a rotating goalkeeper. Off you go. And then the next one, there's so many different options, but let's say for this one, I've just decided to make 2 end zones. At each end, you score a point if you dribble, or receive the ball in the opposition end zone. So we got 3 pitches with 3 different ways of scoring and 3 different targets, which will give the players different skills that they need to execute in order to score their points. And we'll have different attractors. So what I mean by that, if we're doing 2 goals at each end, a 4-goal game, players will be attracted to the spaces on the outside because the goals are positioned on the outside or in the corners. Whereas if you're using 1 goal at each end, a 2-goal game, they'll be attracted to the center of the pitch, which is realistic for defending and for attacking. And also, so despite what I was once told by a tutor, so is having goals at the sides, because that will teach them to slide and shuffle across and have a weak side and a strong side. And then the end zone games will encourage them to play forward, whether that's with penetrative passes or through dribbling. So those are the outcomes that will have to come from just having 3 different games within 1 session, and quite possibly without the coach having to even open their mouth. You might have to encourage them, and just, even it could just be asking them questions to say, okay, what do you need to do to be successful here if they're not being successful? What did you do to be successful here? Or those sort of things. And then if that doesn't work, maybe you tell them. And then another thing that you can do is, before they move on to the next pitch, tell them you've got to leave 1 player on the pitch to explain to the group what it is they have to do, what it is they need to do. And then that player will go and join their game. But you say you've got like a minute to explain it, and then off you go. And then we've got kids teaching other kids. And I spoke to a couple of players last night and explained when you're learning something, the best way to learn it is to teach it to somebody else. Like, you can be lectures about it, but I think the research shows about 5% of what you're told sticks. But if you actually have to then teach it to somebody, you pay extra attention, and something like 80% of it sticks. So that's another little nuance that you can use if you're moving it around. So there's an example of what a 3v3 training session could look like.
Yeah, not to go down but I think, again, where coaches' heads will go is like, coach leaders at clubs will be challenged by, okay, I got to design a whole new curriculum here. How do we get our technical work? Because the technical foundation, but your work is that the technical work is in the games.
There's a lot of technical work within the games because the players will get lots of touches. But it depends how long your session is, right? If you've got an hour and you want to do 10 minutes of unopposed passing, okay, great. You still got 50 minutes of playing games you can do. Or you could just work through, or you can go whole, part, whole, or is it the American term? I forgot what it is. Play,
practice, play.
Practice, play. Yeah. Whole, part, whole, play, practice, play. So you start with some 3v3s. I just said 10 minutes per game. Great. Okay, let's time it be a bit tighter on our timing. Let's make it 7 minutes, 21 minutes into the session. Okay, now let's do 10 minutes of passing, unopposed. Brilliant. Let's see if your passing gets any more accurate in the game. It probably won't, because all you've done is practice unopposed passing, but never mind. You've done some technical work. And then you can go again and do 21 more minutes, and that's the end of your session. So you've got your technical in there. But I don't know, you might want to do 1v1. You might be more focused on 1v1 and dribbling. So first 10 minutes, ball mastery, ball manipulation, very traditional. Great. Now let's do 10 or 15 minutes of 1v1, and then let's play some 3v3 games that will encourage more 1v1s. So we might not have the game with 2 5-a-side goals at the end, because that will encourage shooting. Maybe we need to use a game where there's 3 gates at each end that they can dribble through to score. because that will encourage more dribbling. So you can just tweak the game depending on what you're looking for. It might require a rewrite of the curriculum, but the rewrite is really, this is our topic. These are the topics we're thinking about. These are some games that relate to this topic, and we can apply them, and you'll get the outcomes that you want. If you're being that strict with under 7, that's another question. That's a whole other question of how strict you want to be, how prescribed you want to be on the learning of under 7s is a whole other thing. Because maybe with under 7s, you just want to get them enjoying playing, getting lots of touches, being confident, taking people on, and being creative and imaginative.
I actually think, Peter, it's the coaches. It's the at that level of coach, you're looking at parent coach / introductory coach. So I don't think the clubs, just in my opinion, are happy at handing over more game-based stuff because they probably think that the coach isn't skillful enough to work with it. But in doing that, I would say you create another set of challenges because you then give a introductory coach the lines and and then all of a sudden you've got something that you saw 40 years ago. So what last couple for you, what advice would you have for someone who's like looking down at that challenge to be, I want to do it, but to do this at scale, as in managing 20 coaches, where would you think the big wins are there?
Have a bank of games. Have a bank of games that you can use, and that's potentially the easiest bit because there are, if you type in 3v3 games on YouTube, you get loads come out. Never mind anything that I've come up with, there's plenty there. So you can have your bank of games that you can use. And then if you are in a position where you're doing that, having that role, you've probably got enough understanding to pick applicable games. So that's fine. But the easy wins for you are actually those parent coaches that you're worried about. They don't have to do that much coaching. Their knowledge of the game of football, doesn't have to be that high. In fact, if they have some knowledge of another invasion game, their knowledge of that game will help them if you're doing 3v3 games because the principles are broadly similar. Finding and controlling space, playing forward, dribbling to draw in opponents. These principles, if they play basketball, they're definitely there. Or they have an experience of basketball, they're definitely going to be there. And I would spend time developing a little book of questions to ask the kids in training rather than specific coaching points. Have a little list of questions that they can ask. Those, how might you do this? What could you do in this situation? Those sort of things to get the players thinking, and the players will then provide answers that will give them learning. It's that whole thing again of what do we think coaching is? And if we go back to thinking that coaching is that these children have the empty chambers that we need to fill with our knowledge, then we've probably got a problem. Our knowledge is really helpful if we've got it, but actually if we think the other way, these heads are not empty, these heads have got information in, and these heads have got ideas and imagination in, can we pluck that out and they share it amongst themselves and we arouse the curiosity within them as well? Some kids, they'll go and find out more stuff themselves because they are so in love with the game. Like, think about Marvel comics or something. But they're a Marvel fan. Let's go that way. They love the Marvel movies. Well, they love the Marvel movies. They start buying the Marvel comics. They start reading about that. They start watching YouTube videos that give them information about the stuff. And suddenly they've got this massive bank of information about marvel that you didn't imagine. Well, they can do the same thing with football. And suddenly you ask a kid a question that you don't think they'll know the answer to, but you say, tell me about transition. Who knows what transition is? And then one kid goes bang, and he tells you, or she tells you exactly what it is. And you're like, that's a really good answer. I was not expecting that. But that didn't come out of my mouth, that came out of their mouth. And they've just shared it with the group. So a bank of questions to ask them will be more useful than a list of coaching points. Because the problem with the list of coaching points is when do you actually apply it? If you don't have the knowledge, when do you apply the list of coaching points? With a list of questions, well, let's say we go back to that setup that I had of multiple games. You could just stop a group in the middle of the game and ask them the question and then go away and check them later. So it becomes easier for a coach with less knowledge to do a useful and impactful job.
Brilliant. Brilliant. All right, last one, plug-in time. Coaches will listen to this. US coaches will want to make a difference. I know this because I've speak to a lot of them, and they want to get on board. I think people need more support. I think people need more information, more education. So, where can they get your books?
Amazon will be a good place, as good a place as any to start.
Talk about the variety in the books, though. Like, I know you're uncomfortable, pushing it, but I think it's important.
So the first book was called Developing Skill, a 3v3 guide to soccer coaching. I just looked it up a minute ago, 2018. So 7 years ago, that was published. Nice green cover. Yeah. And yes, you can find it on Kindle and you can get a hard copy. Then Developing Skill 2 came out, which the people who have read both books actually think Developing Skill 2 is a better book, but the book sales don't reflect that. I then wrote Principles of Play, which is relevant because all of the 3v3 games originate and are grounded in the principles of play of the game itself. So in a way, if you read the Principles of Play book, it will help you to create your own games rather than relying on others if you don't already have that skill. And then the last one that was published was Inspired by Legends, 3v3 Inspired by Legends, where I took these figures from the past and took their attributes and applied them to a 3v3 or 3v3 plus style game to try and draw out certain skills that players might want to have in football through the type of game that has been designed. And I think one of the things with that method is that if you use players that the kids know, they immediately will have a grasp of what they want to do. So if you said, we're doing this 3v3 messy game, they're going to know that, oh, we're going to be dribbling. Oh, but he's a really creative player as well. So he's got lots of assists. So we're trying to dribble and find assists, and then we'll be messy. Brilliant. Off you go. Can you go do that?
Brilliant. Peter, outstanding. Massive fan of what you do. Keep doing it. I'm glad there's been that announcement because I know it's going to kick on. And I know a lot of coaches, like I say, a lot of coaches are in your corner. They just need that support. So,
well, I said, we had a little chat before we came on. It'll go quiet in the next few weeks and maybe months, but then come probably about April 2026, everyone's going to go nuts again and go, we actually don't know what we're doing. And that'll be the time again when it's like all of this stuff that we've talked about, all this education, it has to be there by that point, because then we've got a real problem. So people will be learning as they do it. And I've been part of pilot schemes before. And as much as it gives you an opportunity to do things you might not otherwise get the chance to, you'd always end up with the feeling that you didn't get the best version of it. And I think it would be a shame if people go in feeling we didn't get the best version of it purely because the plan isn't in place, the education isn't in place. But that's what we've all got to aim for next summer.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I know you're going to be at the leading part of it, so we'll support you however we can. And thanks so much for jumping on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.